Good afternoon, I guess it is, everyone. Let me call to order this special town council meeting Tuesday, June 13th. And it's good to see everybody. Thank you all for being here so we can do this sort of single issue meeting. Item 2 is public comment. If you have a comment to make, please come forward to the lectern, give us name and address, and you have 2.5 minutes to speak. Anyone for public comment? Going once, going twice. All right. Item 3, review and selection of design options for town-owned property on Faison Road.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Nice shirt.
You too, sir. Thank you very much. Greetings to you, members of council. Good to be with you as always. I'll kick this off. It is about Faison Road, as you know. Some time back, you selected 3 uses for the property. It's open space, attainable housing, economic development, and you tasked your design team with going ahead and preparing 3 options, which will be shown to you in a moment. Next step is really to select the option. That will allow us to move forward and negotiate an economic agreement, financial agreement with the developer. And so what I'm going to do now is ask Matt Brady to come up, and he'll take it from here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry I didn't get the polo shirt memo before I came. But Eric kind of went over where we are and how we got here to this status with the project, Faison Road. We've worked with Landmark on basically getting them to develop 3 iterations, 3 possible development directions we can go based on feedback from council. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Jonathan Oakman with Landmark. He's going to go over these options as well as kind of talk about their philosophy as they thought about programming out the acreage that we set aside for economic development and the other programs. So I'll let Jonathan come up here and he's going to go over those options.
All right.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jonathan Oakman. I'm the Vice President of Development with Landmark Enterprises. And also here with me are Nathan Schutte from McMillan Pazin Smith and Whitner Kane from Seaman Whitesides. As all of you know, this team's been working together on this project since our successful response to the RFP almost a year ago. And during that RFP interview process, which included discussion with yourselves on council, as well as multiple rounds of meetings with town staff, we were tasked with designing 3 different options for the Faison Road project. Okay. Scheme 1, which you'll see, is 8 acres used for economic development with storm water retention off-site. Scheme 2, in that scheme, we added 24 units of attainable housing as part of a mixed-use program, also with stormwater retention off-site. And then we did Scheme 3, which was to keep the 24 units of attainable housing in the mixed-use program, but to have stormwater retention within the 8 developable acres. I know you've seen the slides already, so I'll move quickly through this and get to the 3 schemes to explain what we have. But first of all, let's look at our program. The main goal of the economic development buildings we've programmed for this project is flexibility. These are 10,000 to 20,000 square foot buildings with open, easily configurable space. We feel that these will capture businesses that fit the town's economic development strategy. They're perfect for things like architecture and engineering firms, biotech or pharmaceutical research firms, graphic or industrial design shops, and or financial services firms. All these are groups that use creative office space and that are here in the area. Then there are also ancillary and compatible uses that we feel would fit into these flexible footprints, and we will also show in our schemes. These include small manufacturers, sports training or rehab facilities, and active retail and services. Then 2 of the schemes, as I mentioned, also include attainable housing. And based on our conversations with town staff, we've designed this as 24 townhomes clustered in units of 6, in buildings of 6 units each. The best examples of this type of development are the Gregory Ferry townhomes in Mount Pleasant and the Bermuda Point townhomes that are under development in West Ashley. We are in early discussions with the groups that have both financed and developed these two projects about a potential partnership as part of this project as well. So now let's look briefly at what these could look like. On this slide, we have some precedents and case studies. You'll see the flexibility of the economic development buildings and the variety of uses they could accommodate that we're talking about. In the upper right of the slide, you see the creative office space, and then further down, you see some of the ancillary uses that I mentioned. And then also, just as a context, Wando Park Boulevard, you're all familiar with, as well as Half Mile North and the Lumberyard developments in Charleston. Those exemplify the basic model that we've gone with here, and all these use types are included in one or more of those developments. And then also to the right of this picture at the bottom, you can see an example of the clustered townhomes that we've designed for the attainable housing piece of the project. So we were also asked to be good stewards of the remaining land. So we considered what site programming might take place outside the developable area. And the pictures on this slide depict a range of ways that employees and residents and visitors could enjoy the natural environment around this project. You'll see each of these uses in the following schemes as well. Okay, so let's jump into the schemes with scheme 1 here. Quick orientation, we've got Faison Road at the bottom of the page. So that the actual cluster of buildings reads relatively easily. However, north is actually to the right of the page. So you have north to the right, south to the left, and then west is the top and east is the bottom. So I'll refer to both as I go through this. This scheme utilizes the full 8 acres of developable area for economic development. Stormwater detention is off to the south of the site, to the left, where it's close to the outfall for the site. So the lowest part of the site is the top left corner of your slide. This is the southwest corner of the site. So we've put our stormwater detention near that location for efficiency of flow towards that outfall. You can also see the buildings are clustered along Faison Road with 2 points of entry from Faison that allow both for good access to the site and also help us to do circulation within the cluster of buildings. I would note here also, we do not show a bus stop along this frontage of Faison Road. We are in early conversations with CARTA about how we could connect this project to public transit. It's not clear exactly what that looks like at this point, whether we could incorporate a bus stop here, to a new line that would go down Faison Road, or whether it might be somewhere else. But in short, we started the conversation with CARTA about that topic. So as discussed, these buildings and their uses are very flexible and interchangeable. For the sake of designing a cluster and putting it on paper that we feel works well, I'll show you what we have here. So we have the manufacturing building is building A in the bottom corner. It's holding down the corner of the site is the most visible location. So what we see for that space might be a craft brewery, potentially with some food and beverage services that takes advantage of the visibility of that location. Then in buildings B, D, and E, we've got your creative office space that we talked about, potentially some active retail in there, but that's where the main economic development targeted buildings would be. And then also in building C, further into the site, we programmed this for a sports training facility or sports medicine rehab facility that would connect to the open space that you see here, which would be open fields. So there would be a synergy between the building and some potential outdoor programming on those fields. As for offsite amenities, in this scheme, we've planned a trail system that includes sort of an open air walkways around the ponds, the stormwater detention ponds to the south of the site, and then also trails in the more forested area to the north of the site around the existing wetlands. And then finally, I would mention this street extension that comes out to the west of the site. That street extension has 2 purposes in our planning process. One is to add additional parking and connectivity to the trailhead, essentially, which would be at the top of that, at the end of that street. But then also it's a potential connection for a phase 2 development in the future, if there were to be one, additional buildings, additional park amenities, whatever it was the town might want in the future. This is a organic way in which that could connect to what we've got planned here. So that is scheme 1. Let's move on to scheme 2 here, which also utilizes the full 8 acres of developable area with detention off-site. But in this case, we provide fewer economic development buildings, 3 in this case, because we've added the 24 attainable townhomes, and that's shown as buildings D. So again, as you see here, stormwater detention to the south of the site, with a slightly different configuration. And we have altered the street grid a little bit to give more prominence to the boulevard to the west of it that comes out to the west of the site. In this configuration, it serves as access to the attainable housing buildings, but it also creates kind of a natural divide in the site between the commercial node to the south, A, B, and C, and the residential node to the north part of the site in building D. So if we compare this scheme to scheme 1, we can see that with all parameters roughly being equal, we can only fit about 50 to 60% of the economic development program on the site if we incorporate the attainable housing that was requested. And then the off-site amenities here are roughly the same as in scheme 1, though we have more of a focus on the forest trails to the north, as we have shifted the open fields to the south between the detention ponds so that they have connectivity to building C, which is shown here as the sports or rehab facility. Okay, let's move on to scheme 3. Scheme 3 is similar to scheme 2 in terms of program, but we have included stormwater detention within the 8-acre development parcel, which means that we have less room for buildings. It's hard to see this, but the entire development is shifted slightly to the south in this case, and then the detention ponds are smaller due to the fact that we're disturbing less area and draining less area. But to keep the 24 attainable townhomes, we've lost another economic development building. So in this configuration, you can see that the feel of the economic development component is more like a couple of commercial out parcels than it really is an economic development cluster, which was clear in scheme 1 and to a lesser degree in scheme 2. As such, this scheme is a good indication of the impact on the development of reducing the developable area, or conversely, what could be achieved by adding to the developable area. In this case, we're now down to about 40% of the economic development potential that scheme 1 provides. And then the offsite amenities program is almost identical to scheme 2, except that we've eliminated the open fields as we've eliminated the sports and rehab facility. That's not to say it couldn't be included here, but we've removed that portion of the program for this scheme. So those are the schemes and the background, and I would be glad to entertain any questions or comments or thoughts that you might have.
I'd like to ask some of the members of the Economic Development Committee, is this exactly what y'all saw the other day? Y'all have had a little longer to study it and think about it, maybe deliberate. Would y'all give us what y'all's initial thoughts have been? Bring your mic, so please.
Well, first of all, Mayor, they've touched all the bases that we asked them to do with the development. And I think rather than go all out for one thing or another, I think a blended proposal, which is scheme 2, does some of everything we asked for, but it also recognizes the need for the open space and has a really nice program of trails and open space, which blends into the sports potential, and it also has a lake, actually two lakes, that's part of the drainage, the stormwater management. So I think Scheme 2 does everything we asked for, but it doesn't uh, go all out for one thing or another.
Okay.
Yeah, you go ahead. Mr.
John?
Knopf.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I was, as stated, at economic development. I'm more of a fan of scheme scheme one in the fact that it brings enough economic development and synergy. I believe we need to create an area in which business. I mean, it's economic development. We're supposed to be developing economic energy within the town and a tax base. I think there's a certain size that you have to get to, and you're more of an expert than I am on this, that actually creates that synergy. I think that the newest workforce and the owners and CEOs of companies, in order to get their employees out of the house and into a building, it has to be, my famous word, hip. And it has to have, I know you love it, it has to have things to do. I think the combination of manufacturing, which is going to provide jobs, active retail and services, which is going to create actual tax revenue for us, the sports training and medicine, I think that's a nice touch. The office and flex is going to be maybe some of the least amount of revenue to the town, besides the attainable housing, which will be a negative impact on the town. I'll get to that in a second. And I think that the brew pub part also brings a ton of hospitality tax as well, and could create a 24/7 area of usage in the town. I would propose, I propose scheme one, and we add attainable housing to scheme one. I think that would create just this super energetic area, and it gives the housing, it gives the support for the housing. Again, I think is about $1 million for county tax assessed home now to actually help pay for the services you receive in the town of Mount Pleasant. It's about $1 million now. So attainable housing is going to be about 275, and I'm not against attainable housing. I personally say add attainable housing to scheme one, which would require a little bit more space. So I'm big on scheme one because I also think it's probably the only offer out there out of the three that aren't a negative financial impact on the town. I think this would be the only positive financial impact on the town. I think the others, and I think we could probably have Marcy do some numbers for economic development or economic committee on that. But if it were my guess, I don't know that the other two bring enough dollars into the town.
Ms.
Thank you.
Um, I was partial to scheme one. If we thought other workforce housing opportunities might develop based on zoning changes we've recently made. But I know that we voted to do both, and we voted to increase the acreage if it included workforce housing. So I'm curious about what other council members think about scheme one. If we don't include workforce housing, I'm curious how much acreage is left. Do you know? After, like, with scheme one that's untouched
So I believe
that we own.
the original acreage is 38 acres. Does that sound right? 38 acres total, and you can see sort of on this page. I mean, some of those are wetland acres, and we have used, in this case, we've used scheme one uses 8 acres for development, and that does not include the ponds or the open space. So if you do the math, probably if you take out the development and the wetlands, you're down to I'm going to say probably 14, 15 acres left. What do you think? Does that sound about right?
That's not touched. I guess, yeah, the fact that the drainage was going off the 8 acres that I wasn't sure how much that actually was going to encompass. So.
Right, and that's. I mean, we've tried to. The ponds obviously are. We're kind of incorporating them into that the the recreational portion of this. So they would be in that sort of untouched area that I'm talking about.
Right.
I have a question for
Yes.
clarification. Sorry.
Sure.
So when you say take out the wetlands, so we would be saying 8 acres of development, like a certain number of acres for these retention ponds outside the development, a certain number of acres that is untouched wetlands that will not be developed. Then if you take all that out, then that, because the math wasn't mathing for me, so then the 15 acres is potential add-on. Is that right? Or is it potentially developable? Is that what you were saying?
That's my rough calculation. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
I should also mention this is a little bit off topic, and I'm sorry I forgot to include this in my presentation, but this is obviously in the Carolina Park PUD, and so we've been talking to the town staff. I know that I think this conversation has come up a few times, but there may be a circumstance in which there would need to be an amendment to the PUD to incorporate the uses that we've been talking about here. So that conversation is still ongoing.
Yes.
I think you guys know that I felt like we should just retain the property and keep it in our balance sheet as an asset, which is going to continue to grow in value in case we ever needed it. So you guys know I'm going to be looking for the less intrusive scheme possible. I guess my main question is just timing. So we were just talking about the Carolina Park. I'm thinking Park West. The northern part of town would be the ones who would be using this more, supporting it. So at what point do we bring them the conversation? Because I don't know, part of me thinks that they're going to want some of these amenities and they'll support them, but the other half thinks that they're not going to want that development on Faison. So I'm just curious as to how does that process work? So we come up with this scheme that we like and we push forward, and then we take it to the residents and see what kind of comes back from that. Or
we hadn't planned to have an open house. We have received input all along throughout this process, which has gone on for several months, many months. It's been on many public agendas, subcommittee and full council. Just one person's opinion, but we're reaching a point, given the deadline of the end of the calendar year 2025, where a decision has to be made so we can move forward with the project.
or do nothing.
Right.
Correct.
Mr. Santos.
Yeah, thank you very much. I know before, you're probably tired of hearing me say it, but I think we need more opportunities for recreation. I think that we could do a lot more recreation out here and have some development. Every time I go over to Arthur Avenue Bridge and look at those new buildings that are coming up, to me, it's just it's almost like an eyesore. The traffic is terrible. It's gotten really bad over there, and I think we need an opportunity for our. I hear constantly, and I know we got the Recreation Commission chair over here. I constantly are hearing from parents that they're tired of driving outside of Mount Pleasant to go, whether it's soccer or, whatever sports they want to play. I think this is a golden opportunity to have another senior center, our second senior center out here, as well as recreation facilities that will generate a tremendous amount of revenue for us, and then everybody goes home. So I'm wanting to see a lot more recreation in here for the northern part of town, so that they don't have to continue to travel, and these parents don't have to continue to travel to North Charleston and places like that in order just to practice or to play. So that's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Whitley.
I take Mr. Santos's point, but we as a community voted and approved a $50 million referendum for recreation. There's all that money going towards Rifle Range Park and adding tennis courts and refurbishing some facilities. I think what our town needs at this juncture is economic development. I think we need to bring jobs to the community, high paying jobs. If you look at the home prices in the town of Mount Pleasant, and I think amenities for the north side of town are incredibly important, especially as the population grows and there is more traffic to where they can't hop to Shem Creek as easily as people who live on the south side of town. Having good amenities for them up there, and some of that is starting to happen already. But I think the town can help accelerate that by supporting economic development. I'm in favor of Scheme 1. Having that nucleus of economic development, I think, is key, as Mr. Icafano said, echoing that point. I am concerned about, I do feel we do need the attainable housing component. I am open to the possibility of adding that to Scheme 1, but I also understand that we bought this for preservation as well. And so, when you talk about attainable housing or affordable housing, there was already an attempt by the same developer of Gregory Ferry to place some attainable and affordable housing in the Carolina Park region, and it was met with incredible opposition from the community.
But that was a very different scenario.
Yeah.
I had a meeting with him last week. This doesn't compare.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that was my other thing that I wanted to raise. So
Right.
I'm open.
I'd like to add, since everyone has spoken, attainable housing is economic development. It is the number one priority, I think Matt would tell you, of every regional economic development group, two of which I serve on. And I want to remind council, we just passed a thing telling, the private sector that if they're going to develop and do housing, 50% of it has to be attainable housing. And so in my mind, if you add attainable housing to Scheme 1, you get Scheme 2. I mean, that's kind of the way I see it, right? Scheme 2 is Scheme 1 with 24 units of attainable housing. So I can't support anything that does not make a significant contribution to attainable housing. Our biggest employers in this town are our hospitals and the school district. They're the ones begging us to do something for attainable housing. They can't get staff. And if we diminish that to increase our return on breweries and stuff like that, I think we are setting a very bad leadership example. So I don't see Scheme 1 being something I can support, but I have some other questions if we can get to that point. One is, when you have this open space, is that natural open space, or are we talking about ball fields that are treated and mowed and trees cut down? And I mean, is that open space or is that ball fields? It's two totally different things.
We have left that up to the determination of what council would want. I mean, we've left this as, open space has connectivity to, the sports training facility, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a soccer field with lines on it. It could be whatever, whatever council wants, either or.
Okay. But nonetheless, what you would have to do is go in there and cut down all the trees and create open space, right?
Correct.
Okay. So it's not like green space that already has its trees, its drainage, its plants that depend on wetlands to be there, right? We're
Correct.
talking about human intervention here to create something that it's not now.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
My understanding is that this entire site is basically forested at this point.
Okay. On the housing portion, and y'all's thinking, is that fee simple, or people going to own it? I mean, I can't figure this out because, Mr. Pagliarini, would this be us doing a ground lease to the developer? Are we going to sell it to the developer? What's the ownership scenario here? Okay. So in y'all's thinking, anything that's attainable would probably be rental, right?
Actually, the way we had all of this is up for discussion, but the way we had currently thought about it was this would be similar to Gregory Ferry and Bermuda Point, which are both attainable housing for purchase.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may, sir, once a scheme is chosen, the next time you would see us would be some type of financial arrangement. We had intended, based on conversations we've had before, that would be the scheme that we'd be trying to negotiate, would be ownership.
ownership.
Yes, sir.
So we would in some way be deeding this property to the developer.
In some way. But that's a, no, please understand, because I'm hearing noise in the council, not the entire property.
No.
I mean, if what makes if council deems attainable housing to be necessary for this project, we plan to negotiate what is going to make that attainable housing part successful. And that may include that type of arrangement you just mentioned. Might not be that way for the rest of the property. But if it requires some sort of arrangement similar to Gregory Ferry to make the attainable housing successful, that's what we plan to recommend.
So do y'all, as the people who've done all this work, and we really appreciate it, envision someone else developing the attainable housing, someone who does that professionally and has a track record, or are y'all going to try to do it?
No, we would definitely partner up with somebody who does attainable housing. You know, Landmark Enterprises, our team is a commercial developer, so we do not do residential property and would not want to. I mean, you know, we want to focus on what we're good at and have somebody focus on this that's good at doing this.
So I guess what I'm getting at is when you say partner up, are y'all going to sell it to them, or are we going to deed this to y'all and y'all sell it to them? Because the getting in price of the dirt is what makes it possible to have attainable housing anyway. And if y'all are at one level and they're at another and we're out of the conversation because we've deeded it to y'all, then we're not going to get it, right?
Understood. Although to Eric's point, I mean, all of the financial structure for how this works and the ownership basis, how any of this works is, you know, we've been focusing on what the program is. We have not yet proposed or had a discussion about what the financial and ownership structure of any of this would be. So I think to Eric's point, I mean, that is really the next step that we would go to after it's determined by council what the program is going to be.
Okay. So when you talked about sports and sports training, does that require lighted ball fields, parking lots, all that type stuff? Because we're doing that not only with the recreation referendum, we're doing that across at Carolina Park where we just put, and Jake, you spearheaded that, what was it, 4 million? Right across the street. So it seems like there's a lot of redundancy here. And I'm just trying to figure out, when I hear sports and sports training, are we talking about more ball fields and stuff? Because one thing, you got the airport over there. And as a member of the Aviation Authority, I've spoken to their director of operations. Any lighted stuff like that next to an airport runway would be a huge concern for navigation. So,
understood. The concept for this building C and this scheme 2 is, I mean, this is economic development. This is a company
right,
that runs a, you know, in our, what we've designed here is a, you know, either, you know, personal sports training or, as I was mentioning, sports medicine rehab type facility that, you know, may incorporate, you know, what's shown here is, you know, is an outdoor basketball court, but, you know, that whether that incorporates night lighting, those types of things, I mean, that's far beyond what we've programmed here. And in fact, I should mention or reiterate that, you know, this sports training facility, we came to this because we feel like it potentially has good tie-ins with, you know, Oceanside Academy that's nearby where, you know, where people could do additional training here, or, you know, the rehab that's close to some of the senior housing that's nearby. But the point is that this may or may not be that type of use. This is just what we put down on this paper. Building C in this case is an economic development use,
right,
whatever that may end up being.
But if you're talking about public recreation, you've seen Patriots Point at night, people come and going, the whole public there, lots of lights. I'm just trying, is this going to be another Mount Pleasant public recreation facility?
He's talking about like a private company
this
opening like a sports medicine or sports recreation or rehabilitation, not really a rec facility.
Yeah, that's all indoors.
Yeah, this is not a public recreation facility that we're incorporating.
The basketball court might even be reflective of an office using that.
Yeah, that's a whole different. Right. Yeah, that's not a.
I don't think that's showing us sports. I think the basketball court is the hipness of the area. You know, I mean, you can go out lunch and play a little b-ball.
Right. as Nathan was just mentioning to me, to go back to something you said before, I mean, the open space doesn't have to be that. It was just an idea, but we didn't really ever intend for that to be, public recreation facilities.
Okay. That's a whole different ballgame. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
I didn't mean to say that way. No, that wasn't a dad joke. Sorry. If y'all develop this, who would this be like professionally managed by? Do y'all manage and lease your own thing? Would y'all be running this facility, and what role might the town have in that?
So we do have property management at Landmark. We would, the presumption is that for the economic development buildings, we would own those, or would be the landlord as some sort of leasehold and manage those facilities. For the attainable housing, it's a very different question that I think that would be part of a partnership that we would likely not be involved in. I think there's a bigger question as to, the construction and maintenance of the outside amenities that we've shown here, the trails and whatnot. But we are really open to anything that any way that the town wants to do this.
Okay. I think that was all my questions for now. I did have the one about the public transit, and John, you and I sit on CARTA. I don't know what kind of reaction you got from there about running a bus to there or whatever, but it's a good idea. We would certainly need it for both the attainable housing and the economic development, and we're happy to help on that however we can as this goes forward. And the other thing is, do we have any sort of pro forma on any of this? I mean, I don't think the town thought we're going to make a profit on this once we bought this. So I'm not sure what our benchmark for economic return to the town is on this. I don't know if anybody has an idea, but the bottom line is we're going to have stuff that could be leased in the private market coming to basically town-owned, a town-owned thing. We're going to be competing with the private market, right? In some fashion, we're going to be competing with the surrounding developed areas that are already on the tax rolls, paying taxes, and their businesses going there.
Sure, in some sense.
And I don't know if there are people that look at these things to see if there's a wash, but what we gain here, we could lose by negatively affecting the other development at Carolina Park. So I'm not one to claim that I know how the numbers work on this at all. Jake, did you have?
Yeah, the mayor kind of touched on one of my concerns. I know when we were interviewing applicants, for lack of a better word for this, there were some affordable housing components within some of those, but the numbers for the amount of units that they would have to build per acre with the site work cost plus the construction cost, I mean, has there been just a very high level conceptual estimate on whether it's even possible to build these 24 units for a certain price that could then be sold for an attainable housing number that would meet that attainable housing number? Because I don't know that that's possible, actually.
We have been reluctant to proceed too far down.
No, I get it, but I have serious doubts whether you would even find somebody that would be able to build these 24 units and sell them at an attainable housing number. And so the whole, it could affect, your whole conceptual idea of wanting these units in there could be completely unfeasible. And so, anyway, I know we're not far down that road, so I'll just throw that out there. The second thing that I just struggle with a little bit is since COVID, there actually is a decent amount of office space in Mount Pleasant that's available for lease. By us sort of subsidizing more office space, is that then leased back to other businesses and we're undercutting what's available out there in the private market? Because that doesn't seem fair to me. Also, some of these services that are presented, we have sports medicine folks that lease space in Mount Pleasant currently through private means or whatever. And so I don't know, I really hesitate on essentially undercutting other businesses um, with tax dollars. So I don't know where those questions get answered, but those are my
Well, I can take a shot at it.
yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
You've asked us to expand economic development uses in the
Mhm.
community for
Mhm.
purposes you know all about already. And so I don't know if saying we're taking away from others, but what we're saying is the reason why we have an economic development strategy, the reason why there are specific points in there is because those don't exist currently in the community. And in order to expand the pie, if you will, expand job opportunities, these things are necessary. And so this is an add more than a take away, in my view.
Okay, so that's a great point. So I think the uses and the potential build out of these should 100% focus on things that are not readily
Yes.
on space that's not readily available. So I could get behind.
But how do we? And that's
I
a
don't know.
profound point. How do we bring that? How do we effectuate that working with y'all? I mean, y'all got to get something for your time and energy and money, but I don't expect to put them in a position to turn down a big tenant who's trying to make a decision between something that's on the free market and something that's in our taxpayer subsidized space and say, no, we can't lease this to y'all here. We've got the advantage of, the taxpayers help lower our cost of getting in and our cost of development. Y'all really need to go rent on the free market. I mean, how do we sit here and dictate what type uses go in when they've done what we've asked them to do? I haven't figured that out yet. Yes.
To me, it sounds a little bit like there's some confusion in the fact that I don't think we're renting any of this space except for at market value, though. Is that correct? This is not below market value
Who
rent.
determines market value?
Well, I believe market value will be market value, right? This space is rented for market value. Is that correct? I know we're getting a
That's
little
our
deep.
that's our assumption. Yes.
I mean, the assumption is market value.
Mm-hmm.
So then the assumption becomes scheme 1, 2, or 3, and you guys, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Rambo, you bring up two excellent points. Which one continues to lose the town money? Which I think personally, I think scheme 2 and 3, because it doesn't have enough economic development. And I pulled it up real quick, and it probably should have been part of this presentation, but I pulled up our economic development strategy that we paid for. And our economic development strategy that we paid for that specifically pinpoints this area, and these are the professionals doing this, not me by any means, or even our staff. This was an outside that we joined the CRDA on, and they specifically say that they want information, that Mount Pleasant needs information technology, life sciences, architectural and engineering, marketing and design, and financial investments. And my concern is, and I am for affordable housing as stated before, I just think the only way that the town of Mount Pleasant doesn't continue to pour money into this property is by using scheme 1 with attainable housing added to it. And I wish that we had a figure for something like that. I wish that we could see a figure like where's the break even?
Here's my question. If it's all market rate and it's going to be those things, then what did we accomplish by buying it? It would have gotten developed and it would have been done at market rate anyway. So how do we control a different outcome than there would have been if it had stayed privately owned, stayed paying taxes, and was developed by a private developer? How are we changing the outcome by having invested $6.6 million in effectively 8 acres of land? I don't see how we're changing the outcome. That's what I'm asking.
I wasn't
I'd
part
like
of
to answer
council.
that, Mayor, because what we're doing, if we left it, if we didn't purchase the property, it would have been sold to be any myriad of things allowed under the PUD. Most of those items do not meet our economic development goals at all. By going forward with this, we get to dictate the uses that will go on the property, which further our economic development goals. That's the difference between leaving it.
But how do we dictate those uses is what I'm saying. How do we dictate to them who they can and cannot lease to?
Well, that was one of the big reasons Matt was brought on, so that we're working with the realtors who are helping to fill up the space, making sure that these are uses that are going to further our economic development goals.
Are you also?
So we're not going to lease 9,000 square feet for storage. You know, it's
Right.
got to be a professional services
Right.
firm or one of the things that do it. And that wouldn't be possible without us acting on this land.
And you also go to the CRDA at that point then too
Mhm.
and say, look, you guys provided the study. We did the study. Matt's on payroll. Go do your job.
But at the end of the day,
That's
please
not what
I'm not-
CRDA
I'm not-
does, John.
Well, no, I'm saying we had
It
the
doesn't
study.
work that way.
Well, we had the study done, and Matt is on payroll to help make this happen. That's why it's a wonderful thing that we brought to the town of Mount Pleasant that hasn't been here in a very long time.
but just know, please, that the questions are excellent. We can't provide you a lot of the answers that I think you have, especially with financial arrangements, without a scheme being selected. Once you select a scheme or decide to do nothing, then we can move forward and start adding more detail to what this is going to look like financially.
Sorry. Oh,
Who's that?
Sorry.
Yeah, that's
So-
cool.
So I think what I'm hearing is we bought it to protect it, and now we need to protect it all the way. So go big or go home.
There's one final thought, I guess, is, and I think it goes back to Councilwoman Corley's point earlier, is before a scheme is selected, I mean, I feel like I would want to get a good bit of feedback from folks that live in Carolina Park, and I don't know the best way to do that, because I don't want to get too far. I could see a scenario where we get pretty far down the road, and then all of a sudden we have 100 people come to a meeting yelling at us, saying like, "What are you doing with this land? Like, this is crazy. We weren't ever involved." And I'd rather hear it now and get that feedback on what they would like to see in essentially their neighborhood. And so I don't know the best way to do that, but I'd love to hear feedback from the community.
Ms. Will.
I think the community has had ample opportunity to give their feedback. There's been public news articles about the purchase of this land. There's been public meetings with public comment. There's this meeting right now with we had public comment. It's all published agendas. It's all available out there, and I think there's I don't know that we need to add additional burden to our staff and extend the timeline to hold multiple meetings where I don't know that we're going to get anything that's going to shift the needle for any of us on that. The other thing that I wanted to add is I just kind of just searched what is the purpose of ARPA funds, and it's about, like, this is literally the quote from the website: to make strategic investments in long-lived assets, rebuild reserves to enhance financial stability, and cover temporary operating shortfalls until economic conditions and operations normalize. The latter two reasons, we were fine on those. So our usage of these ARPA funds is really the first reason: strategic investments in long-lived assets. And I think buying land, that's a long-lived asset, but the strategic investment component of that is the economic development and potentially the attainable housing. That is what's going to create a long-term benefit to our community and sort of justify the usage of these funds. I don't think we can leave the land empty and then let this 2025 expire, and then the land will have to be empty for ever.
Just as the chair of the finance committee, Ms. Kotoff, correct me if I'm wrong, but we didn't actually technically use ARPA funds to purchase this property. The ARPA funds were written off based on losses. Essentially, the ARPA funds were used to recoup losses in revenue, and we essentially used just money from our general fund to purchase this property.
I can answer that. ARPA funds made it possible to have funds available to purchase this property.
But it is
So
not
the ARPA
directly
funds
purchased.
didn't directly purchase this property.
Correct. So the ARPA guidelines for what you can and can't do with that money do not apply to this property.
I apologize then. Sorry, I didn't know that.
But they're still connected, though. That's the point. They're still connected.
Money is fungible.
But you just shift it without the ARPA funds. You never bought this property.
Correct.
Ms. Hyatt.
Well, I'm leaning toward scheme one, but I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for the building, the office flex building E, to become attainable housing in some way, even as a rental or something. If we could, and it'd be easier to maybe cut that piece away if we had to sell it. We're talking about, so I don't know if that's an option. sort of switching the use of the building. I also don't know what height is allowed in that area. Is it 30? Do we know how tall the buildings can be in that area?
35.
35 feet.
35. Okay. So I was just wondering if E, it says that's 9,600 square feet. That's probably the max that could be on that space, you think? Could it be?
These buildings are actually designed as being 1 or 2 stories, so
Uh-huh.
for
So it could
35
be a little
feet,
taller?
I think it could be a little taller. But it's a reasonably small footprint, so you're not going to get a lot more than that 9,600.
Okay.
Which would be and I am not a housing person, at least in the development capacity, but the in order to make this work, on the housing side of things, there has to be some there has to be enough of it to make the finances make sense, and whether or not that could be achieved with building E, I do not know.
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
would the Green Commission be a good place to get some feedback? No,
I don't think so on this.
Okay. That was it.
Mayor,
Yeah.
I know Ms. Hyatt suggested that building E. If you're going to take a building, I think you're better off one of the buildings in the back, not on the frontage, because the frontage on the street is better for the economic development, and also putting the attainable housing potentially, if you're looking for just one building, I would suggest C would be most appropriate because it's closer for open space, it's closer for whatever choice the people want to make. It gives them better access, whereas E would give us a better financing for economic development because it's on the frontage.
So let me ask those who strongly favor Scheme 1. When you say with attainable housing, how much are you expecting to see? How many units would you like to see to be a game changer for that?
I don't know. I don't know what that would be to break even or whatever that point is, but I mean, there's area up here. I don't know if it's along this road. I don't know if just not adding the attainable housing to that point doesn't just make the most sense and maximize the economic development with A, B, C, D, and E. I mean, I can make a motion to put Scheme 1 through and add attainable housing to it and send it back to economic development, economic committee for discussion.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, so we're in discussion. I think it would help if we, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, if we clarified what footprint we want that in, right? I mean, there's a whole 38 acres. Are we asking them to do it within the 8? Aren't all of these schemes within 8 acres?
That's correct.
So it would be within the 8 acres? It would not.
Yeah, I mean, in Scheme 1, we have used 8 acres of developable area to get what you see here, not including the stormwater. So, in the case of, to add attainable housing to Scheme 1, more developable area would need to be opened up.
Mine would be in addition to. Well, that's just my motion. It could get voted down, but my motion is in addition to on Scheme 1 to add attainable housing, the necessary space for that, and to send it back to economic committee for that discussion.
Okay, so just to clarify, it would be more than the 8 acres that is presented in Scheme 1 here. I just want to make sure.
That's correct.
Okay.
Move to deny.
They already have the motion.
I know how I'm going to
You
vote.
have to wait to
That's
vote.
a no.
You'll have to wait to vote. Any further discussion?
I would just say I'm not for enlarging the footprint. That's why I wanted to talk about, I do like Scheme 1, but if we're maybe going to convert one portion of that to housing, I'd be for that. But I really am not interested in making it larger at this point. But that's just my opinion.
Any other comment before we vote? Yes, sir.
I just want to say I just don't think we're there yet. So I'll probably vote against any motion because I don't think we're there.
All right, the motion is to go with scheme 1 to expand the footprint outside of the 8 acres and to include attainable housing. So all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
No.
All right, the noes have it. So any further discussion or direction? If we don't pass anything here, we need a path. We need to decide on a path forward. I'm not saying we have to vote on something, Mr. Pagliarini, but the committee and Landmark need to know where we stand and what we're going to do something to work with going forward, right? Some clarity.
All right, move to adopt scheme 2.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to adopt scheme 2. We're in discussion. All right, all in favor of the motion to adopt scheme 2, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Okay, motion fails.
I think it passed.
I think everybody but. Howard, were you a yes or a no?
I was a yes.
So, okay,
I was a second.
1, 2,
Yes.
3 yes, and the other no,
Oh wait, I was a no.
and the others no. 3 yes, and the others no. 1, 2,
So it was 6 to 3,
5.
5 to 4.
We're missing one.
We're missing one.
Oh, 5 to 3.
2, 3, 4, 5. And me.
Move to send this back to committee for further discussion and to get some of the questions answered that remain unanswered.
Is there a second? Second. Discussion?
Do we have a list of the questions?
I think a lot of people asked questions at this meeting that weren't
Mr.
answered.
Rambo, as I understand the questions, at least there were motions made for scheme 1 and scheme 2, particularly in scheme 1 to determine location, volume of affordable housing. At least those are the questions as I understood them. I'm not sure if there are any others, Mayor, that we'd like to articulate, but those at least are the ones on the table as I see it.
Based on that motion, would actionable stuff be that council members who are going to be voting somehow on this at some point get a list of burning questions we have to the committee for answers at its next committee,
Yes, sir,
whenever it is.
That would be appropriate. They can be direct.
Okay.
However,
So is it fair to say if you vote yes for that motion, you're opening up that process, and any questions you got, we send to the committee and the committee will bring them up.
yes,
Excellent.
That's kind of where we are.
I understand there's the motion. I guess my thing is I would love, because this has gone on for quite some time, there's some deadlines, there's a lot of time and money in this. We've already voted for direction on this land. Can we at least narrow down to scheme 1 and 2 and allow the chairwoman to lead us into figuring out scheme 1 and 2?
Except that's not included in the motion that's on the floor.
I guess that's my question then to Mr. Rambo, if he wanted to amend or.
No, sir.
Okay. I'd just like to come out of the meeting
I'd
with
like
some
to
kind
leave
of
it
direction.
open.
Right. So the motion is to send it back to committee, and every member of council can get our questions to the committee. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
No.
All right, you're gonna have to. Yes, do a roll call.
Miss Whitley, excuse me.
No.
Mr. Chapman,
No.
Miss Corley,
Yes.
Miss Hyatt,
Yes.
Mr. Icofano,
No.
Mr. Rambo,
Yes.
Mr. Ritchie is absent, Mr. Santos.
No.
Mayor Haney.
Yes.
Okay.
So what is it?
5 to 4, the no votes.
Wait, 4 to 4.
4 to 4.
4 to 4, excuse me.
Okay, so the motion fails.
Okay.
It does not get a majority. So there is no, so that motion was to send it back to the committee, so it fails.
Move to adjourn.
Second. Second.
It is 6 o'clock. Yes, it is.
We got a motion in a second.
Call for the question.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Does that require a supermajority?
No, sir.
It does not. We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
No.
Okay.
Okay, is that three?
Ms.
The noes,
Mr.
please raise your hand.
Estefano, Ms. Hyatt,
Three. All right, so it's one, two. Mr. Chapman, did you vote yes to adjourn?
I voted yes to adjourn.
1, 2, 3, 4. So it's 5 to 3 to adjourn. All right, by vote of council, we stand adjourned.
Well,
Bye.
let's speak with public comment.
Thank you.
on this.
I need one too. Mount Pleasant Town Council, recently designated again an All-America City, but more about that in a moment. It's good to see everybody here. Those of you wondering, these teal shirts we're wearing were our team shirts, and you'll see that shortly. Item number 1 is our prayer by Chaplain John Prelo, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mayor Pro Tem Gary Santos. Do we have a chaplain here? No chaplain? Would someone please lead us? I'd be happy to. Please.
I get my microphone to work. Let's bow our heads, please. Thank you for the opportunity to gather here today. Thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to be of service to our community and our fellow man. And we just ask that you look upon us today and give us wisdom and guidance. In your name, amen.
Amen. Face the flag.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Item number 3 is approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion, please?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. This is not on here, but it is still FOIA compliant because it's no action of council. We just got back very late last night from Denver, Colorado, where we were again for the 3rd time since 2010 named an All-America City. Do you have the award? Christiane Farrell, our deputy town administrator, led that team. Would the members of the team who are in the room please come around front real quick? Our team started working on this back in February when our proposal was received. They took proposals from around the country and they selected 20 to come to Denver, and of those 20, 10 got the designation. We had to wait till the very last award to hear our name called, but we got it. It didn't mean that we were last place by any measure. But those of us, huh? Yes, right. But our staff did a tremendous job, and so did our citizens. If you saw the video, or if you read the story coming out about this, our citizens are who made this work for us. Their stories that we as a town, we come along beside them, we help them, we work with them primarily in fighting the opioid addiction, opioid crisis, and inclusiveness for those with mental disabilities, education disabilities, and autism. And we know we're designated the first low-country town to be an autism-friendly city. All of that contributed. So we're going to have a big gathering for all of them at some point. But our staff really, really did the work. They wrote the scripts. They got us out there. They gave us an agenda for where we knew. It was like being at camp, wasn't it? We knew where we had to be and what we had to wear. We had 4 different shirts. So I just want to thank everybody that played a part in that, and I look forward to more later. And Christiane, if you would say a few things about that.
Well, actually, I just thank you. I was honored to be a part of this. You know, I have gone all 3 times to All-America City, but this was probably one of the most special. Preparing this application, I got further insight into all the stories that you just described, and walked away probably never more proud at the amazing people, the Nancy Shipmans, Leila Lunas, Millie Ortiz, our police department. Putting together the story became easy because the story was so amazing that we already had. And so it was just a fantastic trip. Our cultural showcase was incredible. To share a little bit of our culture. And yes, my team was fantastic that I had with me putting all this together. But thank you, and really thank you again. It was to this community because they're the ones who made these amazing stories that we were able to share.
Thank you.
Thank you very
3. Focus. 1, 2, 3. That is a video. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, you could have done your rowing for the video. All right. All right, good. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
You're a former educator.
They like started.
Oh,
Okay, sure.
All right, thank you very much. That was item 4. Item 5 is approval of minutes from the May 9th meeting, regular meeting, and the special town council meeting, and the April 23 financial statement. Do we have a motion?
Move for approval.
Motion to approve in a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, those are approved. Item 6 is public comment. If you'd like to make a public comment, please come forward. Give your name and address, and there's a 2-minute clock, and you will know when your time expires. So, Mr. Demore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First speaker signed up is Joe Elmer.
Let's see. Good evening, Mayor Haney, members of council, Administrator Demora. Long time. I'm Joe Elmore, President and CEO of Charleston Animal Society. You don't see me much at this council because of our great partnership and the high bar in which you operate this town. In 9 months, the Animal Society will celebrate its 150th anniversary as South Carolina's first animal organization and one of the oldest in the country. The Animal Society did not get involved in animal sheltering until 74 years after its founding, due to the horrific conditions and mass killings of animals by government animal control efforts, as was the case with many animal control efforts across the country during that time period. Thus, nonprofits stepped in. Last year, over 2,000 Mount Pleasant residents were served by the Animal Society. Traditionally, the county has assumed the financial obligation for animals from Mount Pleasant citizens and animal control. However, it vacated that obligation to animal control in July of 2019. Ironically, the county historically paid only half the cost of the disposition of animals brought to the Animal Society, basically paying to euthanize them, leaving the primary burden to Animal Society donors, knowing that the Animal Society would not put these animals down if it were appropriate to save them. Although this ongoing challenge with government across the river continues, I want to acknowledge and thank you for your leadership, each and every one of you, and stepping up to meet government's responsibility in this public safety function. I specifically want to acknowledge and thank Councilmember Brenda Corley for initiating this effort. I'm working with countless municipalities and counties. I also want to acknowledge the high degree and respect I have for the town of Mount Pleasant leadership, Administrator Eric Demora, Christine Barrett, Clerk of Council, all of whom we've interfaced with and worked with over the years. Again, you don't see me much because it's so easy to work with y'all. In fact, it's refreshing to work with y'all. Cross the river, I can't necessarily say that. You've all been, Eric, Christine, Mayor, you've all been a steady hand. I remember when, I got involved here, it was about the same time Eric did, and my hair was about the same color as his now, but that changed quickly. But well over a decade, and our community, and I know you know this, our community is fortunate to have each and every one of you here. So thank you. Thank you for your generous partnership, and God bless.
Thank you. Next.
George Freeman.
Good evening.
Good evening.
George Freeman, 1450 Bowman Road, president of the CAGE organization, Community Action Group for Encouragement. About 4 or 5 years ago, the CAGE organization worked with the citizens on Old Georgetown Road to petition Charleston County Transportation Committee to build a sidewalk along Old Georgetown Road. They approved building it, but they don't have the money to complete it. I'm here this evening because the town is working on building a road from Highway 17 to Rifle Range Road. And part of that is the realignment of Old Georgetown Road with that new road. I know you're only planning on doing just a little tiny piece of sidewalk, but I'm here today to ask that you look at working with Charleston County to complete the entire sidewalk along Old Georgetown Road as you're working on the road from Highway 17 to Rifle Range right now. This is not just citizens that lives in the unincorporated area. You have Fulton subdivision and Pinckney subdivision along that road. So you have people that are in the city of town of Mount Pleasant and in the unincorporated that walk along Old Georgetown Road. So please take this in consideration and to work with the county to try to build, provide the money to complete the sidewalk along Old Georgetown Road. Thank you.
Next is Cheryl Shown.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Cheryl Shell. I'm an attorney with Maynard Nexon at 205 King Street in Charleston. Thank you for the opportunity to address this board once again. I'm here on behalf of my client for the rezoning of the property located at the corner of Bowman Road and Hospital Drive. This is the first item, and I think maybe the only item on your agenda this evening under old business. As has been previously indicated, my client submitted this request to rezone this particular property from office professional to neighborhood commercial, and has worked diligently with staff, resulting in staff's approval or recommendation to pass this particular rezoning. While not for consideration at this juncture, this board has seen the conceptual plan, which was reached in an effort to satisfy concerns and to be harmonious with the area. This rezoning, again, is recommended by staff. This matter was deferred by this council when initially here for the first reading on April 11, based upon an articulated intent to attempt to secure the property from the seller. When appearing here on May 9th, there was yet another attempt to defer based again upon the articulated intent to secure the property for the seller. Fortunately, it did pass first reading, and it's before this board this evening for the final reading. Since the May 9th date, I think it has been made clear to the town that the seller of this property acknowledges its legal obligations and its contractual obligations and its intent to comply with those. It has no intent of selling or donating the subject property. With that in mind, I would very strongly urge this council to pass this particular rezoning effort on the second reading that's before you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary Martinet.
Good evening, Mayor Haney and members of council. My name is Mary Martinich. I'm with Seaman Whiteside. I'm the applicant here on behalf of St. Peter's Church. We are here seeking annexation of one parcel from Charleston County into the town of Mount Pleasant. That will help be more consistent with the rest of the parcels owned by St. Peter's Church and also be consistent throughout the whole property. We are also seeking to rezone from single family residential to community conservation. This is a downzoning and we see it as positive in order to help the church have future expansion of the church. So we look forward to your review this evening and look forward to answering any questions you may have. Thank you.
That's all I have, sir.
Is there anyone that didn't get signed up? Yes. Please come forward. And I misspoke earlier. It's 2.5 minutes by ordinance, so everybody got 2.5 minutes. I was up late last night getting in.
Okay.
And that's my excuse.
Good evening. My name is Walter Smalls. I live at 1248 Bracy Court, Mount Pleasant. And I am the trustee pro tem at Olive Branch AME Church, along with my other trustees of Olive Branch here. We request your favorable approval of the rezoning of the property that tonight on at Olive Branch, as well as the an amendment to the Johnson Development Tract. Doing these two actions will help us tremendously as we launch out on our building program to build a new sanctuary. And I must say your staff has been very, very helpful in getting us to this point, and I really appreciate Michelle and Peter directing us in those directions. So thank you, and we look forward to proceeding forward.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, that will close public comment unless there was anyone else. There are no consent agenda items. That was item 7. We are in item 8, which is planning. Ms. Reed.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. Council, we have
Move to defer.
Yes, thank you.
We have a motion to defer. Do we have a second?
Second.
Let me say in discussion, this is with the support of the people at Patriots Point. We have representation on that board through the mayor's office. And Patriots Point wants to get a better idea of what people over there are looking at long term as part of the PD, and this would only help us make a more informed vote. So this is not a development ploy. We actually encourage them to defer this because all the pieces of that puzzle are not there yet. All right, the motion is to defer. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
We have one no, but the motion passes.
This next request, I've combined 2 and 3. They'll need to come in the form of separate motions, but I'm going to present them together. The first is to rezone 2 parcels to public institutional for the use of the church, and the second is to take a portion of one of those parcels and to incorporate it into the Indigo Square, the Johnson development.
Move to approve item 2.
We have a motion to approve item 2. Do we have a second? Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is approved.
First reading ordinance number 23019.
Next.
Okay. Let's see. St. Peter's Church is the next one. There's 2 separate ones. The ordinance to annex and
Sorry, we're
zone.
still on item number 3. Apologies.
Item 3.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. I asked you to separate it and then I moved on. Okay. So the second portion is to incorporate this parcel right here. So 1.1 acres into Indigo Square. The Planning Commission and the Planning Committee both recommended approval with conditions. So when the proposal originally came, and here's what that would look like. So what you just approved first reading of would be the PI1, and then this is a portion of that would go into the Indigo Square PD. When they originally proposed this, they asked for a couple of things. Right now, the PD maxes out at 66,000 square feet. They requested an additional 4,000 square feet to do a commercial use. And then they added their own restrictions that there would be no car wash, gas station, or storage facility. Commission and committee went a little bit further and decided to both recommend approval with some conditions that they could only do office professional uses and neighborhood commercial uses. So that limits it a little bit more, makes it more specific, and it would mean that they wouldn't be able to do any sort of, what they were getting at was they wouldn't be able to do a drive-through at that location. So the recommendation is coming before you with the additional 4,000 square feet into the PD and to allow only OP and NC uses. And I am happy to follow up, Mr. Chapman, if you would like, on what you asked about. So I know that the applicant, both the applicant and myself, reached out to the HOA. They were supposed to have a meeting tonight, and it ended up getting postponed, or last night, but it got postponed. But they, I actually spoke with the HOA, and then we've had an owner that actually owns 2 of those parcels reach out to staff as well. So really their only concern right now was, they had a couple of them. One was drainage, and I was going to let the town engineer talk about the drainage issue. And then the second issue or concern they had, actually I think can be pretty easily addressed. And I'll hit that first, and then I'll let Mr. Mitchell talk about the drainage. They wanted to have some sort of privacy fence. So the PD recommends or requires that if you abut area outside of the PD, you have to do a type C buffer. That's a 10-foot buffer with a 5-foot fence. The HOA president and the homeowner that reached out to us didn't feel like that was sufficient. And so we looked, and what the ordinance requires, the town zoning code requires, when you have a commercial property abut townhouses, is a type D buffer. So that would require a 15-foot buffer with an 8-foot wood stockade fence. And they felt like that was more appropriate. I talked about that with the HOA president. He felt like that would be more appropriate than the one that's recommended. Because this is a PD, they're incorporating this into the plan development. You can place that sort of condition on it. They also would like to have, and I think Hunter's Run has this, but an opening where you could access it. And I think it'd be fairly easy to accomplish if you look at the aerial. So if you left an opening in that fence, you could access that retail commercial. So say it was a coffee shop or something. If there's an opening there, they would be able to access the area. So that's kind of what the concern I heard. Those were the only two concerns. Was the buffer and the fence, and then the drainage. And I'll let Kevin speak to the drainage.
Mayor, could I ask her a question?
Sure.
And I know there's no motion, but she's making the presentation.
Right.
Will there be any, I guess, trees left or, and all along with buffer type D?
Yeah, so they'll have to have the perimeter buffer. They'll have to have a buffer. They'll have to have some sort of street side buffer. But they'll only, so DRB will ultimately approve any removal of trees. And they'll have to mitigate, so they'll have to meet our commercial design review, which is 160 inches per acre. So they'll have to retain, and whatever they remove, they'll have to mitigate. But again, remember, they're only asking for an additional, I think, 4,000 square feet. So there's not going to be, when you look at the positioning and the size and then being able to park whatever's there, it's going to be a fairly small development, I would think. But they'll have to mitigate and get DRB approvals for any tree removal.
But the only reason I ask that is it's very thick, vegetated
Right.
there. And if I lived in one of these townhouses,
right,
backing up to this property, I'd certainly want to have that thick vegetation
Right.
continue. So, but you think DRB will take care of that?
Well, if you all, what's required right now by the PD is a 10-foot buffer adjacent to the townhouses. What the HOA president has asked for is a 15-foot buffer with an 8-foot wood stockade fence. So that could be a condition of the PD, increasing that buffer adjacent to the townhouses, and then DRB would review the site development, and they would approve any, if there was any tree removals and mitigation associated with the site design.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Pagloo, would it be appropriate for a motion to approve to include that item of a 15-foot buffer with an 8-foot stockade fence?
Not at this time, Mayor. As
Okay.
first reading, it will come as from Planning Commission and Committee, and then the next time, assuming it passes first reading,
We can
will
do
be-
that. We can do that on second reading.
Yes,
Does that answer
Yeah,
everybody's?
I want to try to do the best we can for this
Mhm.
neighborhood, and it sounds like they're working with the church and all. And a lot of people don't know this HOA, or the new company that owns this, just took over about a month and a half ago.
Okay.
So that's good. Second reading be fine.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is approved.
First reading ordinance number 23020.
Do we get to hear about the drainage?
No,
No, we didn't. That's all right.
it'll be reviewed during the site
Okay.
the development of the site. All right, this next proposal is to annex and zone properties associated with St. Peter's Church.
Move to approve items 4 and 5.
Second.
All right. The motion is to approve items 4 and 5. It has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Items 4 and 5 are approved.
First reading ordinances number 23021 and 23022.
All right. This brings us to old business. Item B1. I think I wrote over that. Or is it just item B, I guess?
B1.
B1. Thank you.
I can kind of refresh
Move to
everybody's
approve.
memory, or
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? Second. We have a second. All right. We're in discussion. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, at the last meeting, we talked about the idea that we were going to do first reading pending a response from the hospital. as of tonight at 5 o'clock, no response has been received. As a result, I would like to go into executive session
Mr. Mayor, may I?
to hear legal advice.
Is that a motion?
Yes, sir.
There's a motion. Is there a second? All right. Motion.
Second.
We have a second. We're in discussion of the motion to go into executive session, the motion to approve. There was a motion to approve, right? Motion to approve is still on the floor, but this executive session would take precedence at this point.
Yes, sir.
All right. The discussion is on executive session, not the underlying. Yes, ma'am.
I believe that we had the attorney for the hospital or the present and was stated the property was not going to be donated, that they were going to adhere to their legal obligations and contract. I don't feel that there's a need to go into executive session to discuss this further.
Any other comment? Mr. Randall? Oh, I thought you were asking to be recognized. All right, all in favor of the motion to go into executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
No.
Hands, hold hands up.
For which one?
The nose. 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, motion fails to go into executive session. Now we're in discussion on the motion to approve. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we deserve a response. The individual that was here is representing the applicant, which is not the hospital. As a result of that, we have the opportunity to do better, and that is to attempt to come up with a solution for both sides. That's the reason I asked to go into executive session. And it is to receive legal advice. And I think it's important for all of this council to hear what we have.
I'm sorry, but the motion failed and we can't discuss it. It's not on the table right now.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, we did vote, so it's not on the table. I can't allow discussion on a motion that has been decided.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. If we're in discussion, my vote on this, and Ms. Chapman, I'm not insensitive to your desires for this, but in our meeting with the current owners, they have a contractual obligation. They told us they have this property under contract, and this is merely a request to rezone it. We're not approving anything specifically, but we are voting on the rezoning, which I feel, we have an obligation to act on that, up or down, but we have an obligation to act on that, which I intend to support.
Can I move to defer?
There is a motion to approve
Okay,
and
okay.
seconded on the floor. So
Right.
assuming that is dealt with one way or the other,
Right.
or if it passes or if it fails, then
Right.
if it fails, there could be another motion.
Right. And we're in discussion of the motion to approve.
So just to be clear,
Sure.
if the motion to approve fails, the issue is dead, or then it can still be deferred.
There could be another motion.
Okay.
Right. The motion is to approve the zoning request, item B1. All in favor to approve, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Right. Were there 3 noes?
4 to 4.
3 noes? Okay. So by 5 to 3, the motion passes.
Final reading, ordinance number 23012.
This brings us to item 9, committee action items, bids and purchases. Who would like to speak to that?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. I have one action item for town council. The Bids and Purchases Committee recommended approval to accept a donation to the 2022 Law Enforcement Target Zero Challenge for a fully equipped patrol vehicle in the amount of $36,449. As such, I move the town council approves the acceptance of this donation. That concludes my report.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item 10, council new business. A resolution adopting the Town of Mount Pleasant Safety Action Plan.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve. I believe this was at transportation, yes, and it was wholeheartedly endorsed by the committee. So we certainly want to see this motion to approve pass. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. 10, I'm sorry. 10B, old business, final reading of the franchise agreement
Move to approve.
with Dominion Energy. We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is approved.
Final reading ordinance number 23018.
Item 11 is to adjourn. If there's no further business before this council, we stand adjourned.